Today we're going to attempt to answer the question, do you need a teacher? And it's a loaded question. And I think first we probably need to answer or figure out what a teacher even is. And if we're asking, do you need a teacher? Do you need a teacher for what? We should probably figure that out too.
Yeah, we got this question a couple weeks ago, and it kind of broke us. It sounds so innocent, like, do you need a teacher? Yes or no?
Should be yes or
So
no.
what?
Yeah.
Right. But it starts messing with your head after a while, and I'm at the point where I hardly even know what a teacher is anymore. Uh,
Right.
so let's.
Is a teacher like the person that's in charge of the classroom, or is it your friend describing something from a textbook? Is it a
Yeah,
textbook? Does that count as a teacher?
is the person you see on YouTube explaining music theory, are they a teacher?
Right.
Is the article you
If
read somewhere?
right.
Yeah. So I think it's worth, in my mind, separating out the idea of explaining something with a teacher. We conflate the two things, and maybe we should, but in my mind, the concept of a teacher is a pretty big concept. If somebody's in front of a classroom, say in high school, they are probably going to spend a decent amount of their time explaining things up on a whiteboard, talking to the class and drawing things out. Like that's part of it, but it's only a narrow part because they also have to do classroom management. They have to deal with behavioral problems. They have to plan. They have to lay out curriculum. They have to deal with administration. There's like a million things that person has to do that go well beyond just them being up there on a whiteboard explaining things. The
So
way
they're almost trying, they are pursuing your knowledge at the same time that you are. Uh, they're after sort of the same thing
there,
that you.
yeah, there's at least more of a mentor role in there than just someone explaining something, right? Is
Yeah,
that what you mean?
because yeah, I mean they're interactive. They're not just.
Yes. Yes. Uh,
Although, like a person on YouTube, say you, uh, I guess I mean you're considered a teacher, although you're not technically interactive. You're not interacting with the students.
right. I mean, nobody called me an explainer. They called me a teacher,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Like that's how we
Yeah.
use the word. But it is different. And I'll tell you this from much firsthand experience on YouTube, there is this ultimate fundamental limitation when it comes to me putting out a video trying to explain a topic where I have to make assumptions about what somebody knows for me to explain anything. You have to. If I'm going to explain what a seventh chord is, I have to decide, okay, do I need to explain the entire concept of a chord? Do I need to explain music in general, how there's different notes? Does this person speak English? Have they played a piano before? Are they playing a guitar? Do they visualize things completely differently? Like there's a million things that go into, okay, what exactly do I include in this video? And how fast should it be? How quickly do I move through this concept? Because that can be a huge factor in terms of how familiar are they? Is this completely brand new to them? Have they watched 15 other videos on the same thing and they just need to hear it laid out a little differently? It can be almost paralyzing trying to decide, how do I do this?
Right.
How do I, and the answer is that you can't. You have to pick something and make your best guess and hope that you title things correctly and set up expectations correctly to where most people going into it do know the things that you've assumed that they know, but you can't. And it's funny, sometimes I would do a video like this and I would see two comments back to back. One was like, man, you could have explained so much more. This was so quick. You should have gone in depth here and gone in depth there. And then somebody else is going, whoa, this was way over my head. I can't believe you thought that I would know this. Like, you're a bad teacher. You didn't, you teach it like
Right.
somebody already knows it. You're like, look, guys, I can't make you both happy. You just have to make assumptions. And when you are in that passive explainer mode where I have some information, I'm going to transmit it to somebody else. That's just a limitation that you cannot get around ever. I don't see any way around it. When you're in person, which we've both done a fair share of teaching in person, that limitation is gone. You get to sit there and talk to the person, and you can say the very first thing you say, you can ask them, or better than asking, you can just sit there and like try to read their face on whether or not they understand it.
Well, I wouldn't say the limitation is gone. It's that part of the limitation has been lifted, and the rest is now up to your intuition on who that person is and trying to read them. And that's probably what makes you a good teacher or bad teacher, is your ability to read the person and be able to see what they need.
Yes. Yeah. Like I said, that's the biggest issue you face if you don't know who exactly you're talking to. But if you do, and you're a good teacher, your biggest concern should be to try to overcome that and be able to figure out exactly where a person's at. What do they know? What do they not know? How do you pace things correctly for them? And you're constantly two-way dialoguing with them. You say something, you ask them a question about it, or, try to feel out, did they understand it? How well did they understand it? You're looking at facial expressions and body language and everything, trying to make sure that every little piece of information you give them is the correct one.
All right. So far we have basically two types of teachers. And that is the one in person and the one not in person.
I guess so. And by not in person, I mean, we could be talking about a book that you bought. Somebody wrote this book. They don't know who's going to buy it. They have no way of dialoguing with you. It could be a course that you watch online or take online, including that. I think that method includes anywhere where you aren't getting a dialogue with the student.
Right. But then, of course, there's a huge range of, even if you are getting a dialogue, how much dialogue? Does that teacher have 30 students, 1,000 students, or is it just one-on-one?
Right.
And then how much time? And so yeah,
it gets blurred, right? Like if you talk about a teacher with 30 people in a class, how diverse is that class? How much can they actually accommodate, the upper end and the lower end of people's experience and what they know? I mean, a student can ask a question and they can respond. So they are able to address something, but it's nowhere near the end of what you get with a one-on-one teacher. But it's also not as bad as that purely passive, you're watching a video type of experience. So there's really this huge spectrum between there.
Okay. So that kind of answers, well, a little bit. It just touches on the question of what is a teacher. Now, what about, do you need a teacher? It depends on who you are.
It depends on a lot of things.
Right. So who is the student? And what makes them able to learn with any teacher or without a teacher?
Yeah.
What kind of different students have you encountered? And which ones are successful versus which ones are complete failures?
That's a good question. I will say this. When I was teaching music a lot, at one-on-one, I mean, there was a spectrum of students. And on one end of the spectrum, sometimes you would get somebody who came in, kid, adult, didn't matter, and they would go, all right, I'm here. What do you want me to do? I had this actually happened in adults more frequently than kids, but one of the first things I would usually do when somebody walked in who was brand new, they're usually nervous, new place, new experience, teacher, whatever. I would always start by asking them a lot of questions that I knew that they knew the answer to. Just stupid stuff like, oh, when did you get your guitar? Where'd you go to get it? How old are you? Stupid stuff like that.
Just to build their confidence?
Yeah, just to, because they're walking into a very strange new situation and they're worried about a lot of things. And if you just give them like little T-ball things of, what's your name? They tell you your name. And you're like, how long you had your guitar? When did you get it? Where is it? That kind of stuff where they get asked a question and they're like, oh, they just doing that actually gets them into a rhythm of, it's okay to ask questions and I'm going to know the answer. And it kind of creates this environment of they feel okay about having that two-way dialogue. Anyway, that's one of the first things I would do. And I had this one kid who was petrified, just so nervous about being there. And I'm like, this is fine. I know what to do. I can get something going with this kid. But his mom is standing in the doorway. And I asked him,
you're
like,
petrified.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm fine. I was scared at first, but after a few years of this, you kind of get it down. But I asked him a question, like, when'd you get your guitar? And I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to get the kid to talk to me in like this dialogue. And the mom's like, last Christmas. Like, okay, do you like it? He doesn't like it. And like, lady, you're killing my ability to like get this kid to even talk to me. Because I don't know, some parents are stupid. But anyway,
right.
Forget how I got onto that. Okay. There would be a type of student sometimes that would come in, like I said, kid, adult, didn't matter. Say, oh, when did you get your guitar? Oh, last Christmas, a year ago. Like, oh, okay, cool. What have you tried to do with it? Have you tried to play any songs? Did you look up any guitar tabs? I'm like, oh, no, I didn't want to touch it. I didn't have a teacher. I didn't want to like, I'd hear this one all the time. I didn't want to pick up any bad habits.
Right.
Right. And I go, ugh, all right. Well, I want you to play your guitar at home. I knew that we were kind of screwed at that point because they just had that mentality that's very hard to break out of. But that type of person would come to me as this expert figure and say, what should I do? You tell me what to do. I'll follow your instructions, and make me a good player. And I assume you had this kind of thing happen too.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And it was so foreign to me because that is not how I attacked guitar and music. I was just so like dumbfounded when that would happen.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, you didn't want to develop bad habits. That's the worst habit you have already developed.
Yeah. Not playing
I didn't
is
know
a very bad habit.
Yeah, and I was so confused by that. I didn't know what to do. Because I can't just make them.
Right.
I don't know. I was really confused by that when I first encountered it. But yes, I would get those people.
Yeah.
Pretty often. Yeah.
I remember having people on the other end of the spectrum where, say, I gave them something to work on. Like, okay, here's a song. If you work on this week, and we'll look at it next week. And they come back the next week and they're like, I'm so sorry. I was gonna work on what you gave me, but then like I heard this Metallica solo and I just got so excited about it, and that's all I've been playing all week. I can't stop. I feel terrible. And I'm like, no, let's take that and throw it away or burn it. Let's talk about this Metallica solo that you've spent 30 hours this week trying to learn. I think in that situation, people have the wrong concept of what a teacher is, I guess, or maybe just the limitations of what a teacher can do. If you're trying to learn to play music, the person pushing you into learning music is you. 100%. A teacher is there as a guide. Hopefully I can answer questions for you, and if you're doing something wrong, I can point it out. Maybe you weren't able to see that, help you figure out stuff that you were stuck on. But the more out of the way I can be, the better, or the happier I am with that situation. The idea that you just show up and a teacher is your everything, your life coach, your motivator, your all of that is just, it doesn't work. I mean, I've watched it 1,000 times over. Those people sucked always. I mean, 10 years later, they're still not very good.
Yeah, it's like they're like super fast, what are they called? Drag racing cars. And a really good student is just like full speed ahead. And the teacher, when they see the car start veering off the road, they just kind of like push it back onto the road.
Yeah.
And then just, try to keep them from crashing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what a good teacher does.
Yeah.
You try to keep the student going full speed ahead.
Yeah. As opposed to the other student who's like still sitting in the car going, push me.
Yeah, push me.
I can't do that, kid.
Yeah.
Okay. We're talking about the spectrum that a teacher can operate on, right? Like on the one hand, you're on this just purely one directional explaining thing, and there are serious limitations to what you can do there. The other hand, if you're in a good scenario and you're a good teacher and you have a good student, people sometimes don't recognize how vitally important it is to be a good student. And I don't just mean that you're smart and you're, disciplined, but you understand the limitations of a teacher and you constantly give a teacher feedback on, I understand this, I don't understand that. Like if you can get a really good one-on-one dialogue situation going, then you can get a lot of value out of having a one-on-one teacher. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think also some people don't understand that they might know things better than the teacher. That they may not have enough confidence, or they may not understand that their brain is also a useful device in this pursuit of learning.
Yeah.
Because it takes a little while to realize that. So they always feel, especially adults, they always feel that they're wrong or that they're doing it the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard for them to just start trying things. And maybe after a little while, you start realizing that you have something to offer, or that your problem solving abilities are actually useful.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Can I tell a car story here?
Yeah. I was about to say, tell the car story.
All right. So this was that moment for me where this idea clicked. So I was younger. It was like 17-ish, maybe 18. I had bought a 1989 Chevy Camaro, and the car was 20 years old when I bought it. So it was an old piece of junk, and still is. But I was, a kid and excited and like, cool, it's okay. I'll fix it. I'll, work on it, all this stuff. That was just exciting to me. And I was learning how to be a mechanic, sort of. I had taken care of some stuff, but I had this problem where the check engine light would come on and the car would start running rough. And, I got a little code reader. I plugged it into the car and it let me check the code. And I looked it up in the book and it said MAF sensor failure, whatever. And the MAF sensor is the mass airflow sensor. It just sits in the front of the engine. It's just a sensor. And it said it failed. I'm like, okay, that's easy. I'll go to AutoZone, buy a new sensor, stick it in, really easy. And the car ran okay for another 2 weeks. And then the same thing happened again. Engine light comes on, car starts to run rough. Like, crap. Looked up the code, same code, bad MAF sensor. And so I don't know, I pulled it out, replaced it again, spent another $80 on a new thing. And I'm like, man, I don't know what the deal is. Same thing. 2 weeks later, got messed up again. I'm like, okay, it's not the MAF sensor. I've been through 3 of them. There's something else going on here. And I've got a meter out. I'm checking wiring. I'm trying to figure out what else is in that circuit. What else could cause it to throw this error? Never could figure it out. So eventually I'm like, well, okay, I'm 17. I'm a kid. I don't actually know what I'm doing. I'm just reading the manual that I bought from AutoZone. I got to take it to somebody who actually knows what they're doing. So I took it to the dealer and I got there and I said, look, I've been through 3 MAF sensors. I know about engine codes. I checked the thing. I know that there's an engine code saying it's a bad MAF sensor, but it's not that. I've been through 3 of them. Something else is going on. They're like, okay, yeah, cool. Well, we got it. We'll check it out. So I leave and I don't know what the deal is, but I made an appointment for 9 and they got it done at like 7 in the evening. Actually, I didn't have a car, so I walked to the library and I read Catcher in the Rye cover to cover in one sitting while I was waiting for them to diagnose my car. I don't know what the deal is with whatever. Anyway, I got back. I'm already in a bad mood. And the guy comes back and he's like, okay, we're all done. Like, cool. Okay. What was it? I'm excited to have this expert who works for the dealer having figured this out for me. And he goes, it's your MAF sensor. I'm like, no, it's not. I've been through 3 of them. That's not it. That's exactly the thing that I told you it wasn't. That's the only thing on the car that I know works. And he's like, nah, man, I got the meter out. I checked everything. It's definitely what it is. There's nothing else. It's the MAF sensor. You probably just got 3 bad sensors. I'm like, 3 bad sensors? There's no way. And he's like, look, we can replace it for you. It's going to be $600 because we only do OEM parts. We don't do that cheap, AutoZone stuff like you got. I'm like, okay. Plus labor, but I'm sure that'll take care of it for you. I'm like, forget it. I pay them the however many $100 diagnostic fee for nothing, and I get it home. A week or so later, I had figured out that I could reset it. If I disconnected the battery of the car, it would reset the computer. I could reconnect it and it would run fine for a little while. I'm like, okay, well, I reset it. And then a couple weeks later, I'm working on the car, I don't know, walking around and doing something, and the car is running, sitting there idling. And I leaned up against it, and I heard the engine start running rough, just like what happens when the map sensor error thing shows up. I'm like, whoa, leaning on the bumper makes it run bad. That's interesting. So I shut the car off, disconnect the battery, reconnect it, start up again, and I'm like, out there leaning on the bumper over and over, and then eventually it happens again. I'm like, whoa, okay, something to do with this. Pull the hood open, look at the wiring, and there's a fuse in between the map sensor and the engine computer. And the fuse was fine. I had checked that many times. The fuse was not blown. But the way the fuse sat inside its little socket, somehow, with just a little bit of pressure on the car or some kind of movement, the little foot of the fuse would just barely disconnect from the socket it was in and then immediately reconnect. And it would cause an open circuit, and the computer would think that the map sensor was bad, and it would send it into run crappy mode. And all I had to do was just squeeze the thing back together, and it worked from then on. And that was when I realized that my idea of an expert was wrong. I'm still, this was many, many years ago, but I'm still irritated at that guy for being kind of dismissive of me, saying, oh, this kid, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Sure, he replaced the master, whatever. I mean, I specifically told him this is not the problem, and he still came back and said it wasn't. But what could he have really done? I mean, as irritated as I was, I mean, he can't spend his entire week trying to sort out this problem. It was a weird little problem that would have been hard to figure out, right?
Yeah, well, I think, well, when we're talking about that self-driving force, I guess it's a pun because it's a car, but you started looking into this before you took it into the guy. If you hadn't done that, you would have ended up paying all of that money to have the car fixed. Just like a student going in to learn piano or whatever, they do the first thing the teacher says, and they may end up wasting a whole lot of time and never getting anywhere because they never started asking the questions and started being inquisitive on their own. They would never know what's right or what's going in the right direction because they're the ones that know what the real problem is.
Yeah. And the way I think about it, nobody could have figured out that problem but me. Because
it's your problem.
Yeah, I mean, maybe what I could have done is paid however many $1,000 they wanted to replace the not broken sensor, and then 2 weeks later brought it in and said, look, you guys replaced the sensor, it's still messed up, and they charged me for some other stupid thing, and maybe $5,000 later I finally get somebody who figures it out. But so technically maybe they could have fixed it. But really, it's a weird problem. It was my car. I'm the only one who cares about it. The dealer is not losing sleep over this. He's just like, well, whatever. I had to be the one to fix that. It was subtle, it was weird, and it was my issue. And if I think about, let's say, playing guitar has, it's an odd instrument, especially something like classical guitar, though it's an issue everywhere. There are so many strange, very subtle little things that you do with your fingers, with your body, with your hands. Just the tiniest little, the way you relax one tiny muscle in your hand and flex the other one, and the control that you get, the exact little posture of your hands and wrists and everything. It influences so much of the way you play. And a teacher can't, I mean, it's so tiny, it's so subtle. A teacher can't see that. They can say you should use this finger here, you should use this finger there. They can help you with the big stuff, but those really tiny little things that are super vital to you developing skill at this instrument, they're your problems. You have to be the one to figure them out. I mean, the teacher can try to guide you, can try to point out big things like, look, you don't seem very relaxed when you're playing this. It looks like you're holding a lot of tension in your hands, or it could be something as simple as the way you move your eyes on a piano. Moving them to the next hand position a quarter second faster can make all the difference. I mean, there's all these little things, and teachers just can't get at that. That is up to you and you alone. And if you're thinking that you can just show up to an expert, like I did with the car, well, that's a more literal example, but it's the same thing in music. You are going to find either that you don't make much progress. That's usually how it appears. Or if you look a little deeper, you will realize that there are just things that you have to figure out. You have to be the one driving at it, thinking, why can't I do this quite right? Let me try this. Let me try that. Let me look at somebody else's hands and see what they're doing. And, maybe there's some subtle difference there. Where do they put their eyes when they play? Where do I put my eyes when I play? How do I think about things in my head? I did a video on my channel about memory and how there's these huge differences with just the way people memorize music. Visualizing where your hands are on the guitar is one thing, but you can also picture the music in your head, like a sheet music. You can use auditory memory where you're remembering what something sounds like. And there's massive, massive differences in how well those different things work. And it depends on your instrument. It depends on a lot of things, but it's hugely important. And nobody knows what's going on inside your head but you. The teacher has no idea how you're remembering music or even knows how to point that out to you.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Well, I was just enjoying it. This is a little different because it wasn't a teacher, but when I was learning or trying to learn, how to draw and get into art and everything, I would have a lot of people make suggestions on what to do. And if I didn't have a good idea of where I wanted to go with it, I would have ended up doing them, and that would have been a huge mistake. So I would spend all this time just doing sketches and doing practice stuff, and people would look at it and say, oh, you need to sign up for this art show. You need to do this. You need to do that. And it seemed like, it may have seemed from the outside to be the right thing, but I kept saying no to them because I was pretty certain that what I was working towards was the right direction for me. And if I had kept taking suggestions from other people and I did all of those things, it would have been a huge waste of time, and it would have sent me off in the wrong direction. I didn't have a teacher, but it could have been the same thing. A teacher could have suggested those same things. Right. So it was that self awareness, I guess, or that.
Well, how do you think you knew that wasn't the thing to do?
Well, I didn't really. I mean, you never know until you've actually gotten to the goal itself, or until you've achieved the thing. You never really know. But I
mean, if you're sitting there sketching, like you said, practicing, I mean, were you looking for something? Were you thinking, I want this to be better in this particular way? Or what's going on in your brain there?
There's like this rough idea of a level of quality I was trying to get to. And that's what I was aiming for, and going for all of these other things just wouldn't have made sense. And so it was my own driving force that got me there. Or that's still trying to take me to that spot. I haven't achieved everything I wanted, but
I mean, you made it this far by pushing yourself there, basically.
Yeah, I was right. After after 4 years of not being totally sure, but being sure enough to be able to say no to certain things.
Yeah.
Taking that chance on myself. I can now say I was right.
Well, you were. I agree.
Yeah, which is nice.
Well done.
I've seen other students just not be able to do that. They'll just do whatever the teacher says, or do whatever other people are suggesting, because they think that these other people have this higher power, or this all-knowing knowledge that they just don't have. And so they just follow blindly whatever the teacher says. And they don't learn on their own because they assume they're starting a bad habit or they're just doing something wrong. And so they never go off on their own. They only ever follow what the teacher says, or they don't learn anything until they're enrolled in college. And that to me is just the worst way to learn something.
The learn the bad habit thing, I have heard that so many times as a teacher, whatever. And that, I'm not going to say it's a myth exactly, because okay, yeah, you can certainly develop bad habits and they can be hard to break. But the severity of that problem compared to the severity of the problem it causes, like people thinking that way, is so massively out of scale that I just wish that we could erase that from everybody's memory on Earth. The idea that I don't want to do something because I'll form a bad habit. I will tell you this, if you are trying to learn something, if you are trying to get better at playing piano, I assume art is the same, you are constantly reevaluating the way you approach it and the way you do it, and you're changing things. You assume from the start that I am not going to start out playing in the most optimal way. You know that. And so if you're working on a piece or an exercise, anything, and you're like, man, this isn't working, let me reevaluate the way I play. And you do that over and over and over. That should just be a part of the way you approach it. And the idea that you might get stuck, we're like, oh, I learned to play with my elbow and I can't break that habit, is just, that's not how you approach something. It's not how you get good at something. You are always reevaluating what you do. If you're not, if you're thinking, oh, if the way I learned this at the start, that's going to be how I do it forever, that's just the wrong mentality.
All right, so we've been talking mostly in general terms.
Yeah.
What about you learning software engineering? I mean, specifically from when you started, you did not have a teacher, right?
No. Well,
okay.
It depends on how you define teacher.
Well,
nobody in person.
You did not have no in-person teacher. You didn't go to school for it. You taught yourself using whatever online teachers or books and stuff. So how did you go about learning? You first figured out that you wanted to do software development, right? Or software engineering. Well, I want to use the right term because
they're all, software development, coding, whatever. I want to answer that, but let me back up for just a second, because I do want to talk a little bit about what is good about teachers. I feel like we've been a little bit towards the negative side of.
Okay. I have a lot to say about how good teachers are and how important it is. Keep talking.
Okay.
Maybe we'll hold off on the self-teaching questions for a minute.
Well, it's hard to answer without a little more context around what the pros and cons of teachers. Okay. Here's what can be amazing about a teacher. I remember when I was learning classical guitar to audition for the music program at UCF. And I was self-taught in every sense of the word. I did not have a guitar teacher or a music teacher of any kind. I had never been to school for music at all. I was going to try to pass this audition purely on my own. And so I had bought a classical guitar and I'm, practicing. And I get to the audition and I did okay. I played the pieces and did what I needed to do. But immediately the guitar professor who's there, I kind of get finished with the audition, and he says, "You play like a whisper. I can barely hear you. You're like a little mouse playing guitar." He was mocking me, not in a mean way, but it hurt a little. But I had played electric guitar up to that point, and on an electric guitar, the idea of volume is just not relevant to you. Right? Like you put your finger down, you pluck the string with the pick, and then how loud it is up to what the volume is set to on your guitar and the amp and all that stuff. Like, you don't think about that. You're never thinking, I gotta get this to come out louder. It's gotta be louder. But that is how classical guitar works. Most of the time, classical guitarists don't play with amplification. Maybe they should, but that's a different question. You know, you'll go to a classical guitar concert in this big concert hall, and you'll see this person way up there on the stage, and that's it. There's no amplification. They are playing as loud as they can, trying to get this sound to come out of the instrument because that's just how they do it. And I just didn't like that, didn't even occur to me. And so I show up for this audition, and like I have utterly failed or like not even recognized this fundamentally important thing to the instrument that somebody who was experienced recognized instantly. It's like, you need to fix that. This is a huge problem. And that was just this massive blind spot. And it was actually really hard for me to develop. I mean, I needed a different guitar. I mean, higher action, the way you play the instrument is different when you're trying to get a lot of volume out of it. And it was hard to adapt. Anyway, the massive advantage of a teacher in that scenario was that they can point out stuff that you can't see. And there is a lot of value in that. It would have saved me a lot of agony if I had had a teacher even just say, I could just play it for 5 minutes and they go, okay, here's some stuff you got to work on. Your volume is non-existent. You have to learn how to play loudly.
I completely agree. There were things as soon as I got my job, the past 4 years before that, I was completely by myself. I mean, totally. I had no art friends, never seen another artist ever. And all of a sudden I get a job and I'm surrounded by a couple other artists.
Yeah.
And immediately some of the things being seen by the other artists, he's like, don't do it like that.
Is there anything specific you can think of, or?
Yeah, he's like, the sizes of things actually matter. So, make sure you draw them, correctly. I don't know. I had just drawn things just totally out of scale. It made no sense. Part of it was just I was so nervous, but he noticed these things that I guess I had huge blind spots to, and he was immediately able to point them out. And yeah, it hurts, but I couldn't get that by myself. At least it would have taken me a lot longer to get there. So yes, absolutely, there are positives to just having an expert review something that you've done.
Right. Yeah, and getting okay, I want to get towards how I taught myself to learn programming, and same for you with being an artist. But one of the biggest things you get, and this isn't, we usually talk about, I don't know, teacher's a big word, right? It encompasses a lot of things. Usually a teacher is in a school. That's where the teachers are. And if you want a teacher, you oftentimes mean going to school for something, right? Like if you want to be an artist and you're going to go to school for it, then you go to college and go through 4 years of that. There are a couple things that you get, like despite the major limitations of teachers, there are a few really important things you get there. One of them is an environment where you are, for better or worse, I mean, there are such things as terrible classes that you shouldn't be taking. There's problems there, but you are around a bunch of other people who are also learning. You are dedicating a huge part of your time, your life to being there and learning stuff. Like just being put in that place is hugely beneficial to you being able to learn something, just being in that environment. The idea of program, if when you want to go to school, you pick a major and then you go do it. And once you start, you have a couple of electives here and there, but for the most part, you're just on this track and you do what you're given to do, week to week assignments. You take this course, you take that course. Like you don't really have to make any real decisions about how or what you need to learn. You do one course after the other, and that's what you do. Somebody is handing you this entire path from start to finish. So when you go to teach yourself, those things are gone. The environment is not there unless you try to create one. And then I think the biggest thing for so many people when they're thinking about, okay, I'm considering teaching myself, is what do you do? I mean, you have to design a program, so to speak, for yourself. Right? Like,
yeah,
I assume it's the same for you as an artist, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we want to jump into the teaching yourself stuff, yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, well, I'm just going to start in full.
Yeah.
At the beginning, because I hope that What?
Real quick background, just because I don't know if we've mentioned this. I went to school for music, but I don't have a career in it. I'm a self-taught software developer. That has been my career for quite a while. I started from basically zero, taught myself to do that. You did some schooling. I think you said you have an AA, right?
Yeah.
But not in anything relevant. And then you taught yourself to be an artist, and you
Yes.
now have a job.
Yeah. And so I spent like 4 years learning
Right.
art. Then I got a job, and that's my career now.
Right.
So, yeah, just briefly.
Yeah.
One day I was bored. I decided I wanted to learn a little bit more about art because I was getting tired of music, or getting tired of failing at music. Different episode, another time. Anyway, I decided to order this book, and it's called Imaginative Realism by James Gurney. It's important. The name James Gurney is important because I'm going to talk about him later. I start flipping through the book, and I realize that is what I want to do. Everything that's in the book, that's what I've always wanted to be able to do with my art. Do this realism style, whatever. It doesn't matter that much. But in the book, he talks about all of these different ways that you can learn how to do these things. I had no idea what he was talking about. I didn't recognize any of the words in it. I didn't understand what was going on. I just knew that that's what I want to do. That looks really cool. So every time I'm reading a page and there's a term that I don't recognize, I look it up and I just start obsessing over it because it's really, really interesting to me. And then at some point I decide, you know what? I'm just going to do this. I'm going to be an artist. And that was a big decision. And I can remember specifically the day that I decided I'm going to do that. And I think that's an important step that you need to take if you're going to do something.
Right.
Anyway, so in the book, he references a lot of other art instruction books. And so I would start collecting all of these books and going through them. I realized very quickly that going through 30 books at a time is not possible. And so I whittled that down to maybe 3 or 4 books, and I would start going through those. And then I realized just reading them, you could not understand the concepts that way. So you actually had to put them into practice. So I would start putting them into practice. But then even then, I had no way of proving that I was right on anything. So I'm trying to observe myself doing these things. I'm trying to be my teacher and the student. But there's really no way for me to prove that I'm right. So my learning really started when I got my first commission. I got my first little job, and one of my friends hired me to do 2 paintings. So that's when I think my learning really started being put to the test. And I think your way of learning is very similar to this. I think you mentioned at one point. Anyway, so I get commissioned to do these 2 paintings, and I start trying to utilize all of those concepts that I've been learning about and reading about. And of course, it's extremely difficult, and I have no idea what I'm doing. But I'm sure I learned something from them. You start putting yourself to the test, and then you can stand back, look at that, and realize in this real world problem, this is what I was able to come up with. And then you're able to see it a little bit more clearly. And then I get commissioned again to do 2 more paintings. And I do the same thing. And now I'm taking all of the lessons I learned from the first set and applying them to this set. And
Was the difference there that, I mean, you're saying that was a big part of what helps you know if something was good or not. Was it just that you had to do something very specific that was, you could kind of evaluate, does this fit the bill for what this person wants? What made that different for you versus going through a book and saying, do a practice sketch or something?
Well, doing practice stuff, it just kind of piles up and you have so much of it. It's hard to judge exactly what it's for. So when you have a real world job, something that's outside of you, like you're actually delivering this thing to this person, you're able to see it as if it's a real product, and you're able to view it much more objectively, just like you would view any other piece of art. I mean, yeah, there's always some bias to it, but say you've written songs all your life and you keep them on your computer and you listen to them, it's really hard to look at them objectively until you release them and they're out in public and they're like this actual real thing that you can then experience just like everyone else is experiencing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have some stuff I want to say about that, but keep going.
Yeah, it's like this stage, and nothing has been on the stage yet, and then all of a sudden I placed these two paintings on the stage,
Right.
and now I'm standing back with everyone else looking at them. That immediately puts you into this observer mode. Anyway, so I go to these next two paintings, I get that job. It's same thing. I'm continuing my coursework and then trying to apply all of that knowledge to the real world problem, which is these two paintings that I'm working on. And that kind of continued. I kept getting these little projects and I would go all out, spend all of my time trying to solve the problems that those paintings created. Every single time I got a new job, that was what I was doing. And they would take me forever. I would spend a very long time on them. One of them took me at least a year to do. And it was not from procrastinating. It was from just trying to solve these problems. And there's a lot of them that just kept popping up. But I think that having this external source added to the mix, that really kicked up the learning for me, or made it easier for me to, like, I don't know, be aware of where I was going.
Yeah. Well, okay. So
did that make sense?
Yeah, it did. It did.
Okay.
I'm extremely happy you brought that up because when I think about my experience of learning to develop software, I've heard people say this. There's some people who can speak like 12 foreign languages fluently, right?
Right.
I can barely speak English fluently.
Yeah.
And I have gone to school. I did 2 semesters of Spanish in college, and my Spanish is horrifying. Like I didn't learn any. I might be able to read a word here and there. I mean, it went from 0 to still 0. I didn't learn any of it in any effective measure at all.
Right. I took Spanish and German, and I can't.
I also took
9.
German.
I can say 9.
Yeah, that's about where I'm at too. It's horrifyingly bad. And if you listen to somebody who can speak 12 different languages and say, "Oh, how do you learn a foreign language?" I mean, I failed at just learning Spanish and I actually tried pretty hard. I mean, I did all the exercises in the books. I did the little online portal thingy. I spent some of my time trying to translate, Harry Potter in Spanish and stuff. I mean, I really wanted to learn it and I failed miserably. And what these people say, if you want to learn a language, is that you should start speaking it immediately. Just start. Find somebody who will talk to you, pay them if you have to, and just every word you say is in that language. And you're like, how could I speak a language that I don't know? And like, no, you just try. Think about being a 2-year-old learning English. That's how they learn it. And they learn it really fast because they just start trying to speak it and they're immediately wrong. That's okay. You keep trying to speak it and you constantly like readjust and start learning what is correct and what isn't. And that's how you do it. And that is one of my biggest complaints. I won't even call it a complaint. I think it is a serious fundamental failure of formal education is that very often we don't actually teach something the way it ought to be taught. We aren't teaching Spanish the way people learn to speak Spanish. We're teaching it in a way that it can be graded. We want it in a format where it is 30 people in a classroom who are taking tests and doing assignments that get a grade so that we can stamp a grade on that person at the end of the class. How well that works for them learning Spanish, I'm not saying it's never evaluated, but it's not evaluated very hard. We have not managed to break outside of that format, even though it's demonstrably wrong.
Right. I know that all of those people in my German classes and my Spanish classes also cannot speak Spanish or German.
It didn't work. We didn't learn any. That's a problem. Okay, without getting too far into all the problems with our assumptions about education. When I wanted to learn to code, specifically, I wanted to learn how to. This was right when the iPhone had come out. I was looking for a career, and I thought I'm going to get into building programs for the iPhone. Brand new platform. I think there'll be opportunities there, and I was right. There were. And the way I did that was to say, well, if I'm going to get a job building apps for an iPhone, I'm not going to have a degree. I'm not planning on having a degree. And if I had gone to a school to get a degree, it would not have been in anything extremely relevant to iPhone development. So I'm like, all right, what I need to do is I need to have some apps that I can show people to prove that I can do this thing that I'm telling them they should pay me to do, right? Like I need a portfolio of programs that I've written. And so I went, okay, I got to figure out how to write a program. So I'll start with, hello world. How do I get something to show up on an iPhone? And then from there, all right, how do I draw a circle? How do I get text? How do I make a button? How do I make it do stuff? In a sense, it was like, okay, how do I speak iPhone? How do I make stuff happen on this thing? I did not start with, okay, what's the history of computing? Who invented the bit and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And like, right? That's not how I did that.
What are the 10 fundamental rules of iPhone development?
Yeah. What's the history? What did Steve Jobs do? And like, none of that stuff mattered. And even less obvious than that, I mean, a course in, the fundamentals of computing, how do memory registers work? How does a CPU work? Like, it's not that stuff is bad information, but it did not help me get to where I needed to go. And okay, you can make the argument, well, every programmer ought to know all these basic fundamentals. And okay, you might have a point there, but they also need to know how to do the thing they want to learn how to do. And completely ignoring that in favor of a bunch of only tangentially relevant things is objectively stupid. So the way I approach coding or trying to learn how to do this thing was I would just start trying to build something. And it didn't matter if it was a million times too ambitious. If I said, okay, I want to build this app that's 3D rendered and uses all this stuff, I would just start, and then almost immediately I would hit a wall. Like, I don't know how this works. I keep seeing this concept of an object in a class, and I don't know what that means. And I'm just stuck on this, and I know that I need to know it. And then I would think, okay, it's time to go find some resource, some course, book, whatever it is, that can explain this concept that I know I need to know, and I can't seem to get my head around. So actually, somebody asked me this question recently, and I had to think back through what I actually did. But I watched a course from Stanford from this guy. I forget the professor's name, but he was super good. And he goes through basic Objective-C development. It was Objective-C at the time. Now it's Swift, but he started from the beginning, and here's how the language works, and here's this idea of this and that. And then even inside of that course, I got to some point where I got stuck. Maybe the object thing was new. And I'm like, okay, I got to go find something more fundamental to explain this concept to me. So I would go back, I would stop this course when I got stuck, or it stopped being useful, go somewhere else, find a resource, and then watch that. And in a sense, the idea of taking courses, I hate it in so many ways. I do, because the idea that you're going to go become a programmer by taking one course and then another course and another course doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
But that information is very valuable to the right person at the right time. So if I'm trying to do something, I need to learn how this concept works, and I know why I need to learn it. I have a serious need for it. I'm not just having someone tell me, you need to learn this, it'll be useful one day in the far future. I know I need it. I need it right now for a project I'm trying to make it further on. So here's a course that explains it. Then I am soaking up everything in that course. It's perfect. It's exactly what I want. I'm hyper motivated to learn all of this stuff because it fits in with something that I'm trying to accomplish.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And that's the only way I feel like I really learn stuff, is that
Yes.
if it satisfies the problem I currently have in front of me, that's the only way it really sticks with me.
Yeah.
Because just reading general informative art knowledge. It like
It's
yeah, it's
me.
great, super interesting, and then I just forget all
Right.
about it because it doesn't matter. It doesn't apply to me right then.
Yeah, it's devoid of context. It's meaningless. It's just floating
Yes.
in the ether of your brain with you not being able to apply it. I remember, because I was on an engineering track for a while. I remember taking differential equations, which was a course, and I remember getting an A in it. I did very well. And now, if you put a gun to my head and said, "What is a differential equation?" I couldn't answer it. I don't
What?
even know what that is.
Okay.
But I took a whole course on it and I got an A. Because it didn't mean anything. I never
Right.
once used a differential equation for anything. And I guarantee you, if I had some project that I was working on that I was interested in or motivated to do in whatever sense, and I needed to use differential equations for it, I would learn 10 times more than I ever did in that class because I'd be motivated and interested and I would remember what they were after the fact. Like that would have completely changed my relationship with this idea of differential equations.
Right. So, well, backing up, you said that in order to start learning software engineering, you would just start building something, right? But when you say you would just start building something, I'm sure you had something specific in mind, right? You weren't just trying to make something cool, right?
Well, yeah,
Because
yeah. Um, I, I mean, one of the first things I built was a game. No, it wasn't actually. Now that I think about it, it was a music sequencer, a step sequencer. I You have to remember at the time there wasn't very much on the App Store. It was still pretty new. And I actually worked with Dad on this because he had some coding experience and I had music experience. So that was the first app that I built. I had this idea of, oh, it would be really cool to have a step sequencer on the App Store. You press a button and like as the little, play meter sweeps by, it plays a sound according to which buttons you've lit up and everything. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can just Google step sequencer, it'll show up. Um, but I had thought that's a really cool idea. I want to build that.
so you had a very specific thing in mind. You didn't just start off trying to accomplish some vague, weird thing. You
Right.
had you had a specific goal, a music sequencer.
Right. But
Yeah.
even then, the idea was, okay, this is the thing that I want to do. And it wasn't the only thing I wanted to do. I knew that I needed a portfolio. I had thought, okay, I want to build a game, and I had some ideas on what that game ought to look like, and I had to, pare it down into something that was, I mean, at first I didn't really know what the scale should be. Like how complicated can one person make, for a game? And as I learned more, I was able to kind of move that goalpost down into something that made more sense. But I had a couple things that I wanted to build, like this step sequencer, or this game. And I go to start, and I go, I don't actually even know how to make a program go from my computer to the phone. So the first thing I'm going to do is hello world program. How do I just get Xcode to put something on the phone? And that was a learning experience in and of itself. And once I
Right.
got that figured out, it's like, okay, what's the next thing? Well, if I'm going to make a game, I got to be able to put a picture on the screen. So how do I do that? And then how do I make something move? And you start learning all kinds of things like, oh, there's game engines and frameworks and different ways of doing it. And let me go research those and figure out what makes the most sense and what's a shader and all that stuff. So you start having this goal in mind and you start to try to make it. You immediately uncover all of these things that, oh, I have to go learn about this. And then you go learn about
So
that.
I think, say, if you enrolled in college, the professor gives you an exact timeline of when things are due. It gives you a program to follow.
Yeah.
When you're teaching yourself and you're on your own, and there's no one telling you what to do, choosing those things, those projects,
Mm-hmm.
like building a music sequencer, whatever, it gives you that program, and then you're just following it.
Yeah.
So as you're teaching yourself, the teacher version of you chooses that thing, chooses that project to go follow, and then the student version of you goes and tries to solve all of those
Yeah.
problems.
I think that's a good way to
Um,
put it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
the
think,
teacher version of you just tries to make sure you're staying on track to get to that end goal.
yeah.
Um,
I think the reason why I avoided answering that question until we talked about more of education was that I think that's one of the biggest problems you face if you want to be self-taught, is just that feeling of, what do I even do? It just feels like the biggest blank page you've ever seen.
Right.
And that's something you don't have to deal with at school, other than just, okay, which major do I do? And that's what you do. So having an approach to that is, that's what it ought to look like, in my opinion. If you're teaching yourself, you're not getting a degree, so that's out. The only other thing is basically a portfolio, work that you've done that you can go show to people. That's what you're after. And I really can't think of anything else that you're pursuing. I mean, I don't know, if you're playing a sport and you get really good at a sport, you could demonstrate that to people.
The portfolio was exactly what I did.
Right.
After a couple years, and I was kind of aimless. I was kind of just going for this vague idea of doing like realist type art. I knew there was some things that I absolutely had to learn, but I wasn't quite sure of the career.
Mm-hmm.
My friend kind of told me, hey, give me a portfolio and maybe I can give you a job in this industry, the themed entertainment industry, which is like
Right.
a Imagineering, Universal Creative, that kind of stuff. Anyway,
Yeah.
so once he said that, I was like, oh, that is a perfect opportunity for me to then get, start a career. So then I had a specific goal, and that's when I started building my portfolio specifically tailored to that industry.
Right.
And I had 8 to 10 pieces or empty slots I needed to fill, and every commission was then geared towards filling those spots. And if I didn't get a commission for it, I just did it myself. Um, and that was my
Mm-hmm.
big goal. So it was all about building that portfolio, and then all the little problem solving that had to go into each and every single piece out of those 10
Yeah.
or 8 to 10.
I think maybe the biggest mistake that people make when they set out to, oh, I'm going to teach myself how to do something, music, let's say, just say coding, right? So many times people will think, all right, I'm going to teach myself how to code. So I found this course and I'm going to go do that course. That's where I'll
Right.
start. Maybe after I'm done with, how to program in Python 1, I'll take how to program in Python 2. And that's not the way to do it. You're thinking that way because that's what a school is like. And schools can be good for certain reasons, but the fact that they do a bunch of courses one after another, that's not why they're good. That's one of the biggest problems with a school. I think I looked this up before we got on. So they call them MOOCs, the massive online open courses. Basically, not that
Okay.
long ago, or maybe it wasn't that long ago, 10 years ago or something, there was this big movement of, hey, the internet, it's new. Let's start putting courses online so people can take them. And then it's not just rich people who can afford to go to Harvard that can be smart and know how to do stuff. The whole world can do it. Everyone will live in this utopia of everyone having access to education. And you can do it. You can go on edX and look at all these different courses on pretty much anything you can think of: philosophy, history, physics, math, whatever. There's Coursera, there's a million of them. And the dropout rate of the people who start a course and the people who finish is like almost 100%. It's like 97, 98% of people don't finish the course. And the reason is that it's pointless. There's no value in just taking a course of stuff that you're going to forget later. That's not how you approach learning how to do something. If that course is exactly what you need for building your thing or developing your skill, that will be an incredible experience for you and you will love every bit of it. Or maybe not every bit, you'll love the parts that matter. But just taking courses one after another, just for anyone, think back to high school, college, these courses you took that you spent hours and hours and hours on. And unless that's something that you still use, you've probably forgotten about all of it. I know that I have. I took Calculus 1, Calculus 2, and Calculus 3, and I don't know how to do a calculus problem. Like, I know that it has something to do with derivatives and integrals, and that's about it. Seriously. I spent so many hundreds of hours of my time on that, and I don't remember it, because just taking courses in the void is not the way to do it. You need to have something that you're after. Build things, create things, play music, play songs, whatever it is, write songs. And then as you hit these things that you suddenly realize you need, then go find a course on that or a book and go learn that information.
Right. The reason for the course needs to come before the course.
Yes, exactly. A course
Yeah.
fills a need. And if there's no need for the course. Pretty much it's tautological.
There's no need for your brain to remember it at all.
Right. Right. It's meaningless.
Okay. I have a big... I want to run this by you because I'm curious to see what you think.
Okay.
But something like software engineering, it's a pretty new thing, right?
Mhm.
All right. Something like illustration, though, goes very far back.
Right.
So there's a lot of tradition that's included in being a good illustrator. Of course, it depends on what type of illustrator you are and what kind of artist. But for the stuff that I want to do, it relies a lot on these long traditions that have been around for a very long time. All right, so we started talking about this a while ago, but with pirates, right?
Yeah.
Okay. When you think of pirates, you mostly think of what, like Johnny Depp and the Pirates of the Caribbean,
Yeah, and like
right?
pirate ships and everything.
Yeah, and they got the three-pointed hat and they're dressed
Peg-
all cool.
Yeah. Peg leg, hook for a hand, pointy
Yeah, and the
three-point hat.
parrot.
Yeah.
So most of what you know of pirates comes from this guy named Howard Pyle. He's an illustrator that was in the late 1800s, early 1900s. He created this whole look for pirates. Not much was known then about what they actually looked like or anything really. So he created this whole look, and it's still around today. That's how we structured Pirates of the Caribbean around them, the illustrations he did. Anyway, I only bring that up because he was incredibly influential at the time, and still is. He's known as the father of American illustration. Super big deal. Anyway, if you haven't heard his name, Howard Pyle, you've for sure seen some of his illustrations.
Okay.
Doesn't matter that much to anyone other than illustrators. But anyway, he started a school called the Brandywine School, or the Brandywine tradition. And he taught a number of students, but one of the more important ones he taught was N.C. Wyeth. Okay. Any illustrator knows who N.C. Wyeth is. N.C. Wyeth had a son named Andrew Wyeth, also extremely successful and influential.
Yeah.
All right. Another student of Howard Pyle, the pirate guy, was Harvey Dunn, a guy named Harvey Dunn, super successful, very influential. Harvey Dunn taught this guy named Dean Cornwell. Dean Cornwell is one of my favorite illustrators of all time. I have a point to all of this, I promise.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Dean Cornwell then taught this guy named Med Schaefer. Med Schaefer, also extremely successful, also one of my favorite illustrators. Med Schaefer was really good friends with Norman Rockwell. Okay. Everyone knows who Norman Rockwell is.
I know that name, yeah.
Right. At least if you live in America,
yeah.
You know who Norman Rockwell is. Norman Rockwell then goes on to create this this correspondence course called the Famous Artist Course. And this was in the 50s, and he did it with a couple other illustrators of the time. And that was kind of the end of that education string, the big thread of
genealogy
education.
of illustrators and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll stop there for a second, and then I'll go back. I promise there's a point to this, or at least
better be a payoff here. Go ahead. All right.
Okay. So you know the Gladiator thing, where the crowd screams and chants it, and they give the thumbs up or the thumbs down.
Yeah.
Right. You've
heard
like
of Gladiator. This. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in the movie Gladiator, they give the thumbs up or the thumbs down.
Yes.
All right. That was not really known at all until one illustrator a French illustrator did this painting of this gladiator, and the whole crowd is all giving the thumbs down to kill this other opponent. This painting caused this huge uproar, and all these it was this big historical I don't know, controversial thing, and they were arguing over whether it was historically accurate or it wasn't. They were giving arguments for it being accurate and for it not being accurate. Anyway, the only reason I bring that up is because he was extremely influential at the time. All right, we're almost done here. So the illustrator is called Jean-Léon Gérôme. I think I got his name right. Anyway, he starts a school, and he teaches this guy named George Bridgeman. Anyway, I'm almost done. George Bridgeman becomes one of the biggest authorities on figure drawing. So if you're an illustrator, you know who George Bridgeman is. Another student of Jean-Léon Gérôme was Robert Beverly Hale, I think, and he also became.
Are you remembering all these, or are you reading off of a screen?
Yeah, no, I'm remembering all of them because I knew all of them before I realized they were all connected. But anyway, and if there's any history buffs, they're gonna point out some problems that I have probably, but I think I'm being pretty accurate.
You're doing fine.
Anyway, under George Bridgeman, okay, a student of Jean-Léon Gérôme, which I think I'm getting his name right. Anyway, under George Bridgeman is a guy named Andrew Loomis. Andrew Loomis, one of the biggest illustrators in the 50s, and for his instruction books, which I've been going through over the last few months and the last few years.
So are you at the end of this genealogy of
Yeah, I'm getting there. So Andrew Loomis wrote these amazing, incredible educational art books, which if you're getting into art, check out Andrew Loomis. He's got some great books. Anyway, another student of George Bridgeman wasn't just Andrew Loomis, is also Norman Rockwell, right? And so then Norman Rockwell goes on to create this amazing famous artist course in the 50s. And it wasn't a school, it was a correspondence course. And I think that's kind of important because it's a little bit different. And it's heading more into the modern age where you're not able to teach one-on-one quite as much. It's more broad. But anyway, it was a set of 3-ring binders, and I have all 3 of them, and that was largely my education going through those 3 books. But I bring all of this up, for a couple of reasons. One is that book I got from James Gurney, Imaginative Realism. James Gurney is extremely influenced by all of those illustrators, the Brandywine tradition and Jean-Léon Gérôme's whole course and everything. So from both of those 2 worlds comes this illustrator, James Gurney. And my education has mostly come from him and from the famous artist course from Norman Rockwell and those illustrators. And I think it's really interesting because all of these guys that I didn't know were connected are connected through this series of teaching. They were all teachers to the next one and to the next one. And they all become these extremely successful, influential, big, powerful illustrators. And it's like that across the board. They're all connected through these teachings. And nowadays, after the famous artist course, and of course, this is very heavily opinionated by me, and maybe other people disagree, but
hey, this is our show. You can be as opinionated as you want.
Right. And you're still following, right?
I think so. I mean, I don't know the names, but...
Well, what I'm saying is, once the famous artist course came out, there hasn't been very many illustrators that are at that same level of quality that came before them, in my opinion. Yes, there are some incredible illustrators nowadays, and James Gurney is absolutely one of them, in my opinion. And there's a couple others, and there's a lot of great artists out there, but in terms of this type of art, it doesn't exist anymore. It is gone. The teachings just aren't they're just not being taught like they used to be. So I'm wondering if you think that there are things that must be taught that cannot be learned through, say, a textbook I guess I have a lot of questions and a lot of
No,
thoughts
no,
on
no.
this. I probably can't get to them all, but I'm wondering if you think that there are intangible things that can never be
Okay.
recovered. Um, so I can never meet Jean-Léon Gérôme, and I can never meet Howard Pyle or any of these guys that came before. And there are books on them. There are books by students of theirs writing about their teachings, but I can't be taught by them. So is it possible for me to obtain that same knowledge that they would have passed down? I guess is my question. What are your
Okay.
thoughts on that?
Okay. You finally summited Mount. What's your point? Um,
Yeah, I don't know.
so okay, no, it was worth it because that's an extremely important thing to bring up. Um, I think it part of that question again gets at what we started with, which is that the idea of a teacher is extremely broad. And it sounds like what you're talking about, somebody who had one of these people, I can't remember a single one of them, as their
That's okay.
teacher, it was not them standing up in front of a group of 50 people and lecturing. That's not what that sounds like to me. It sounds like it is much more of a mentorship one-on-one type of relationship. I mean, is that a fair
Well,
assumption?
yeah, from reading about some of these, I mean, of course, they're all different. It's very varied, and it's
Yeah.
across a long period of time. But yeah, a lot of them would spend a lot of time with their students and get them involved with their actual business. So say like Jean-Léon Gérôme, I think would take his students after school is done and bring them back to his studio and get them set up with a whole career and work with them on how to do all of that.
Yeah.
So it
What
wasn't just like lecturing for 30
right.
minutes or an hour and a half and then leaving them. Yeah.
When I went to college for music, the way the music program works, and it's a little dependent on school, but uh, I had to take a bunch of courses, and like I said, they were largely useless, and some were okay. Uh, but part of the way you handle being a performing musician is that I had the guitar professor and I studied directly under him. And for all 4 years, you take master classes with this guy. So it's you and your other peers, and you're in this class with this person for all 4 years, once a week. And then
Oh, so you had the same professor for 4 years?
yeah, all the way through. And
Okay.
I had an hour, although sometimes it was closer to 2 hours of private lesson with him every single week for 4 years. You are very much studying directly underneath somebody who is there one-on-one working with you on exactly what you're doing. Uh, and not to mention the masterclass type of format where you're also in more of a group setting. But I mean, I don't know how many hours that adds up to, but it's a lot, every week, an hour or
Yeah.
two with this guy. Uh, Now, unfortunately, I didn't click super well with my guitar professor for whatever reason. And I don't really want to get into that. But even so, with not really being the ideal teacher student pairing in that situation, it was still vastly different than what it was like to sit in a classroom and listen to a lecture. I'm directly underneath somebody. And like you said, there's for playing a guitar, and the same for art, there are so many tiny, subtle little things that you don't get from a lecture. You, like I said, a lot of it you are discovering on your own, and part of it is you observing somebody else. And I mean, me working on a piece, I get in there, I play it poorly, and he goes, this is good, this is bad, whatever. And then I go, can you play it? And he goes, yeah, of course. And he plays it. I'm like, wait, hold on. Show me this part again. Play those two notes back and forth. Okay, do it again. Okay, now back up and like he'll sit there and move through at whatever pace I need while I sit there like my eyes are 4 inches away from his fingers trying to figure out exactly how he's doing some very subtle little thing. Like how exactly are you positioning your hand so that you're able to do that so fluidly without, just moving a billionth of a millimeter to touch the next string and causing it to mute itself. Like there's this tiny stuff that you can't get at in any other way, I don't think. I don't know how well that answers your question. I guess the answer is yes. I think that there are certain things that don't work well. I won't say they don't work well teaching yourself, but there is a huge value in that. And as I said, if you have to have the right mentality, you have to realize that you are looking for these little things, these subtle, tiny bits of technique and information and whatever that you're having to figure it out. But having somebody there, if you have the right mindset, can be massively valuable. And I think that there are things that are kind of lost if you don't have that, or can be.
Yeah, and I agree. And at first I was thinking of teachers as just this like general, person lecturing in a high school class or whatever. And it's just like, do you need teachers? Hell no, I don't care. I'll just learn on my own. Like I don't need that. But then I
Yeah.
start thinking about, well, what if the teacher is the leading, well, for me, what if he is the top illustrator? What if he's the best that's ever been? What if that's my teacher? Do I need him in order to be really good? I would certainly like to be involved in that class, yes.
Yeah.
So I started thinking about teachers being not just this general thing. They are just as unique as any person
Mm-hmm.
ever. So are they necessary? I don't know. It depends on a lot of things, but a good teacher could be the secret to a lot of things.
Yes. And this is, again, a part of it is a complaint about formal education. Okay, if you kind of stick with a teacher is somebody who explains something definition part of it for a second.
Right.
One of the massive advantages you have if you are being self-taught is that if you find a course on Coursera on something that you need to learn and you open it up and you realize that the teacher sucks, you don't have to stick around for more than 30 seconds. You can just peace out. Like,
Right.
this person sucks. I'm going to find somebody who doesn't suck.
Right. Even
and I'll
though it's
learn from
knowledge,
them.
even though it's like technically knowledge, it's a waste of time for you as a
Yeah.
person.
This is a different rant for a different day, but there is a massive spectrum of how good people are at explaining things, even in the context of an Ivy League school. You can go find courses from Harvard and Yale and all those types, and if you watch a handful of them, you will realize very quickly that some of those professors, in terms of them explaining concepts, some of them are fantastic. They are just extremely talented. And some of them are horrible. They're just bad in every sense of the word. It's as if they're just complete amateurs. They've never tried to explain something before. Right. Or they just suck. I don't know how else to put it.
Right. Yeah. So stop thinking that just because they're called professors or whatever, that they have this sort of like magical knowledge.
Yes, they are hired because they are prestigious experts in their field, not because they're good at teaching. If they're good at teaching, it's usually incidental. They are really brilliant in their field, and they're also really brilliant when it comes to teaching, and they recognize what's good and what isn't, and they work on it and get better, and they end up being a really good teacher, and by that I mean explainer of things. But some of them are awful. And when you're in school, like I said, even though there were great things about working with the guitar professor, we really didn't work that well. He didn't quite work with me the way I wanted him to, and it wasn't great. And I had to take, I don't know if I should even mention music appreciation. Okay.
Just do it.
I'll try to keep this from getting out of control. I took a course called Music Appreciation. It was an elective, but you have to take electives, and there weren't very many to choose from, so I don't know how elective it really was. But I took this course, and it was appreciation of pop music from the past several decades. So the music that everyone likes, talking about Led Zeppelin and the Beatles and all those types. And the course is in an auditorium with 300 to 400 people. And it is taught by this guy. And I don't know how else to say this, but he was an asshole. He was.
But don't say his name.
I can't remember his name, but I'd be more than happy to throw him under the internet bus because he was horrible. He was.
All right.
He never he never failed at being condescending and disrespectful to everyone there. It didn't matter what your question was, what you needed, anything. He just talked to you like you were a misbehaving 2-year-old. He was just a jerk, and I can't stress that enough. But also, his teaching style, and remember, this is music appreciation. This is the music that everyone likes. Like, it's universally appealing. That's why it's pop music. His way of making you appreciate it was to stand up in front of this 300 to 400 people, and he had typed up PowerPoint slides in Microsoft Word, just typed them like, this is the Beatles, this is their release on this album, and he would stand there and read them to you. For an hour and a half, he would read typed up notes on stupid trivia from pop music. Okay, so I'm going to end the rant there.
Hey, my rant was like an hour long, so.
Yeah, but you had more of a point at the end of it. I can't even begin to say how many things are wrong with that scenario. But it is criminal that is even allowed to happen. If you sat down with anyone and were like, look, we got a bunch of people and they're all interested in pop music. What should we do? How do we encourage them to explore this interest in popular music? You know, the music that everyone likes. I think anything you came up with, anything, would have been a million times better than that. If you said, we're going to put them all in a room, and we're going to tell them all to be quiet, and we're just going to play a Beatles album. That'll be one class. And then for the next class, we're going to play Alice in Chains. And then we're going to play whatever. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Anything would have been better than that. And I had no choice. I mean, again, it was an elective, but there wasn't much else I could take. I had to go through that. I was forced through that. Right. And if I was trying to accomplish a goal, being self-taught, I would have pieced out of there after 10 seconds. It's insane that happens. And that is a massive failure of formal education, that kind of thing is even there. And you aren't able to choose. You can't just bounce out of a class when you realize that it's not good.
Right. I wish it didn't work that way. I wish you could teach yourself, and then I guess you can enroll in some classes at colleges, and
there, yes,
and you know,
yes,
and you can do
you can audit. There's ways around it, but that's really not the college experience. I did not have a choice at the time. If I had left the class, I would have not had enough electives to graduate. So in a practical sense, you don't just get to decide what works for you and what doesn't.
But no matter the system, no matter the way education works now or whatever, you need to have that self-driving force and know where you want to go. I mean, I have to believe it, all of those illustrators that I listed, I am sure every single one of them really wanted what they got and knew what they were headed towards. Even if they had the best teacher in the world, it doesn't matter unless they were very self-driven.
Yeah. So, I guess, I don't know. Should we try to bring this home? Like, what is the point of all this?
What is the point of all this?
Okay. The original question was, do you need a teacher? I think my answer to that is that I don't want to say everyone should be self-taught. Whether you go to school or not is a bit beside the core issue.
Yeah.
You're the one steering the ship. You need to be the one pushing, looking for answers, trying to solve the problems, trying to get good at whatever it is you're after. And I guess it's worth mentioning that not everybody necessarily really wants to be super good at something. You can go to school and get a degree and then go get a job with your degree. That's valid, and I don't mean to take anything away from somebody who does that. That's a totally fine way to go. And some people, I think, do thrive in spite of that. But I think that's the core point I wanted to get at, was that teacher is a vague concept. They are not all powerful. They're not this genius expert that can solve problems for you. You have to be the one to go after whatever it is you want to be after, and you should use teachers whenever possible. I mean, if you're self-taught and you don't go to school, you're still getting books, watching courses online, watching YouTube videos, trying to find the best teachers you can to get information from. And then there are certain times when having somebody in person that you can poke at and ask questions of, and assuming they're a good teacher, which unfortunately not all of them are, but if they're good, you can potentially get a lot of value out of that too. But a lot of it comes down, again, I've experienced this from the teacher side, how good of a student you are. And by that, I mean how well you are able to have that dialogue, get what you need, tell the teacher what you need. You know, being good at that will determine night and day what you actually even get out of a teacher.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yes.
Anything to add? Should we just kind of leave it there?
Nope, I'm good. I think
Okay.
that, yeah, you summed it up well.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, that's teachers. Thanks everybody for listening. Remember, we read all your feedback. Please leave a comment on YouTube. Email us at theoveranalyzerspodcast@gmail.com. We will read that too. And we may try to respond to some questions and comments every month or so. Thanks.
Yeah. See you next week.